the little ones, but some I have one friend who's working exclusively on 180 video now, Boundless, and some of the, National Geographic stuff, things like that. I don't know. Okay. Last time somebody stood in the middle and counted me down, but. There we are. You see us?
Are we on? No.
Over here?
Are we on? Do you know how to turn this on?
Oh.
No?
Oh. Hang on. One that I had yesterday just pressed in the middle, but.
Okay.
I think
Seems
we're
like we're on.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the metaverse, a dive into tools and products for storytelling. And I'm very glad to see so many people here in the room. And I'm glad to have two experts with me today that will recap the 10 things we learned at the INMA XR Masterclass series on how newsrooms can creatively use and report on XR, and what it takes to future-proof your newsroom and to take a deeper look on tools, products, and technology to set you up for the journey into the metaverse. And first of all, we have Jodie Hoperton with us. Not in person, as you can see, because we're just two people here. But Jodie is over here on the top of the screen. She's the lead product initiative at the INMA Association, and she's based out of LA. So she woke up very, very early, 6:30 in LA right now. So thank you for that, Jodie. Very glad to have you. And to my left, we have Laura Hertzfeld, storytelling innovation executive with over a decade of experience helping news organizations develop online content, engagement, and distribution strategies. Before we kick it off, a special thank you to my colleague Stephanie Bosch over here. She's also with Meta, and she has worked closely with Jodie on the build-up of the XR Masterclass. And by the way, it's a good segue to the housekeeping. So you can ask questions, not in person, but either use Twitter, use the hashtag Perugiaverse, or Twitter to Laura, Jodie, or myself, or raise your hand. Stephanie has some post-its. You can write down your question and we can use your question. So please make this as engaging as possible so that we have your questions throughout the session. And with that being said, enough from myself, and over to you, Jodie. Tell us a bit more about the 10 things, how newsrooms can creatively use and report on XR.
Hi there. I am so jealous that you guys... Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I am so jealous that you guys are all in Perugia, and I hope you are having the most amazing time. As Guido said, my name is Jodie Hoperton, and I lead the product initiative at INMA. For those that don't know us, we're a membership network. We're almost 20,000 members across 901 news media companies in 83 countries. And we really look at the business of journalism. We look at what people need to do to transition to really work to match today's behaviors and trends. So if you've got any questions about that, please do hit me up. We are going to talk today about the 6-part masterclass that we ran. Here are the 6 experts that we had come and speak. Laura is very kindly joining us today. And some of these other faces, I'm sure you all know. I think Zilla Watson is also in Perugia right now. Some really smart people. And these were some of the topics we covered. You can still watch the series if you want to, and we'll share this so that you can get the links. And I hope you still enjoy it. There's 6-hour sessions, all the presentations, all the additional links and things that were shared are there. But I'm going to run through some of that now for you. So first of all, what is AR, VR, MR, XR? I'm not going to go through these individually. But just to say, there isn't actually peer-defined definitions of all of these things. So here's what we're using for these. And we're going to talk mainly about AR and VR a little bit today. And of course, we're going to talk a little bit about the metaverse. So I thought I'd give you some background. What happened and where are we now? You may remember in around 2015, 2016, we had this whole VR wave. Some great work was produced. Everyone got really excited. Some of the big media companies jumped straight into it. And then it kind of fizzled. And now it's coming back. So what's changed? So 2015, 2016, now we're in 2022. What's changed in that interim? Well, the technology is massively different. It's cheaper to own and develop VR. The adoption of 5G and better internet speeds also means much lower latency, so it's easier to watch things. There's also more players in the market, and Apple is likely to be launching some glasses soon. The rumors are rife. And that normally signals the tipping point. And of course, the metaverse is coming, as we all know, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So I thought I'd just share a couple of images with you that I hope demonstrate some of this. So this is me in 2015 at an event, and you'll see the big clunky headset, the earphones. The guy in the back, I think, is actually Nick Newman, who many of you will know. You'll see he's got this headset on. He's got these lights over the top. Over the shoulder, you see he's carrying a bag. That's actually a battery pack for that VR headset. And this is Noni de la Peña, an emblematic group, showing off some of the work that they've been doing in 2015. As you can see, it's pretty unwieldy. That's not something you can have at home. It's not something that's super comfy or easy to wear. These aren't quite VR headsets, but you can see where their technology is coming in. On the left are the Snap glasses, spectacles, and on the right are the Meta glasses that have been developed with Ray-Ban. Both of them just record video right now. The Ray-Ban glasses have got sound, which is absolutely incredible, way better than I was expecting. So you can already see that more technology is being built into smaller glasses, and soon these will have AR. These things are going to merge over the next 5 years or so. And talking of AR, you're all using AR. These are some filters that I just took from Instagram playing around yesterday. Anyone that's used a filter is using AR. And I also wanted to share a couple of my favorite things. So Supernatural is my favorite VR experience that I have at home. I box in VR. I wish I was a runner, but I'm not. I do not enjoy jogging. I don't have loads of time. I've got 2 small kids, but I do want to work out. And so I do that in VR, and I really enjoy this. It takes me to incredible places, and I actually get to do a workout in 10, 15, 20, 25 minutes. And yeah, the headset's still a little bit clunky, but it's getting there. As the smaller they get, the better they are. And I literally use this 3 or 4 times a week. I love it. And then the other thing that I'm absolutely in love with, and if anyone comes to LA, hit me up, I will take you here, is Dreamscape. And I fundamentally believe that this is the next level of entertainment. We won't necessarily be going to the movies in the same way. These are VR experiences where you go in, you get kitted up, and you literally go and are part of these worlds. You can go diving with these magnificent blue whales. Alien Zoo is actually my favorite. You feel like you're in Jurassic Park. So these absolutely incredible experiences. Everyone I take there is blown away. And no, I know those aren't journalism, but I wanted to show you those because they're here now. These are things that people are paying for. They're going to right away. We know that there's enough business there for that to be sustainable. So that's why now I think it's the time that we need to start looking at this, just so that we're ready. I fundamentally believe that this is like the next wave of mobile. Remember before social media came, we didn't really understand what mobile was going to bring. And it's been absolutely immense. I fundamentally believe from everything I've seen over the last 6 months, deep diving into AR, VR, XR, the metaverse, that this is the phase we're in now. And that's why we need to pay attention. So here are some of the things we learned. I thought I'd just pull out 10, and Laura's going to talk, I know, about the session that you guys had the other day. Laura and I talk about this stuff all the time, so we'll have a lot to talk about. So as I said, the hardware and technologies moved so much in the last few years, tipping points coming soon, and you're already using AR in Snapchat and Instagram and Facebook. For us, immersive technology is amazing because it allows us to give readers so much more context at one time. And it allows us to actually put users into a situation. In addition to being the explainers, we can put people into a war zone. We can show people the aftermath, not just videos, not just text. We can put them there. And that is such a game changer. And if we get started today, it means that we're going to have the skill sets, the tools, and maybe even a library of content ready. So as I say, this is fundamentally changing right now. So we don't need to jump in and spend fortunes, but it is worth starting to look at it so that we are prepared as an industry. There's so many different software options to create immersive experiences. Some of them are free, and obviously some of them are heavy duty licensed software. But they're out there. It's easy to create things now if you've got the willingness to go and try. If you want to follow anyone on this, Robert Hernandez at USC is absolutely incredible. And he shares so much and things that you can literally do with just a few people that do not cost much. So when you start building this, there's some things you need to start thinking about. When you explain anything around XR, extended reality, AR, VR, don't use technical terms. You don't need to go in and give them a whole briefing. You just need to tell them what they're going to see, how they'll access it. And you can do that with AR in the experience as well. If you're working in VR, just make sure you choose the right story. So that normally involves exclusive locations, embodiment, empathy. I'm really excited about the exclusive locations part. I think it gives us a really good opportunity for local media to show off the places that you know best that other people don't know. You can show people your area like no one else. And of course, ethics are highly important. The same journalism standards hold true in VR. The problem, or the thing I think we've got to really look at, is so much can be manipulated when we're looking at anything that's computer generated. So we have to lean on that. We have to make sure that we've got standards there and that we are very clear if something did not happen or if we're adding anything on. We've also got to be aware of the potential of information inequality, because I'm saying headsets are cheaper. They're a few $100, but that's still a few $100 that many people don't have. So we've just got to be aware of that. One thing that came across, and this was something that Zilla mentioned and other people have said to me a bunch of times afterwards, the way in which you introduce the immersive experience is massively important. Many of the things that we do might be hard hitting. So develop that onboarding. You can't just throw someone into a war zone without telling them. The example that Zilla gave was she was in an experience and she got executed. That could be traumatic. And the thing is about VR is it tricks your brain to think you are there. When I'm doing boxing, I'm sent to Iceland, I'm sent to Jordan, and I feel like I'm in these massively open spaces. If I'm near a volcano, I feel the heat. If I'm cooling down, I feel the ice around me. It's crazy, but it's true. So it just means that we've got to be really careful when we're introducing these things. And just as we're thinking about content, brands are thinking about this as well. They're thinking about new ways to engage with audiences. So the advertising and commercial opportunities are very real, even now. So from everything I've learned, it's worth partnering with people. That's the most important thing. Talk to people about what you're doing and seeing where the appetite is. And a bonus one here, which sounds silly, is use the technology. We talk about this stuff, but go and jump into it if you can. Play with it on your phones, play with AR, borrow a headset, but you can't create something for something you don't understand. So you've got to immerse yourself as much as possible. Now, I've skipped through a whole bunch of information. I am very happy to share more and more about this. We also released a report which is available to everyone. Again, we'll share that link. It's in this deck. But I hope that you find this useful. This really expands on those 11 points that I just raised and can take you through, and we're hoping it really serves as a blueprint. So that's my whirlwind stop. I'm going to hand you over to Laura, who is there right in front of you. Now, Laura on her LinkedIn profile has storytelling innovation, but she's one of the OGs of VR. She's a native here in LA, Venice Beach. She's an all-round superstar. And she's also my go-to for anything related to VR. Like Laura is literally my first port of call. So Laura, I'm going to hand over to you, and then I think we'll go to questions.
Thank you. I bring Jodie everywhere as my hype person, so thank you. That's great. You're doing my slides, or am I doing my slides? You're doing my slides, I think.
I've got your slides.
Think so? Maybe? Uh-oh. Did we lose her and my slides? Possibly. There we go. Okay, maybe I can, oh, okay. I can't see them on mine. I'll do that here. Okay, sorry about that. Apologies for anyone who was in the panel that I was on yesterday with Thomas Ema and Zilla Watson, who's former BBC and also participated in the INMA report, as well as Lakshmi Sara, who has done a lot of innovative, immersive stuff at KQED and other places. So I'm going to repeat a little bit about some of the things that we talked about yesterday and some of the things that we've worked on with INMA on their report. But really, because this panel is about kind of what's next, we've talked a lot about yesterday was a lot of learnings about projects in AR and VR that happened over the past 5 years. But from that, I want to talk a little bit of kind of what are the opportunities for Web3 and the metaverse for journalists. I think the first, it's probably the most tangible right now. I cannot see your presentation. Oh. Uh-oh. I can saw, oh, it went away.
Jodie.
Hi.
Oh, there it goes. And now, okay, well, I'll look at it on mine as long as it's up there. Okay, cool. Sorry about that. So I think the most tangible is really virtual production, which there has been such an immense amount of work in this space through the pandemic. If there's any silver lining in the immersive space to the pandemic, it's really the growth in virtual production. We had a lot of work in this space happen over the past 5 years, particularly in broadcast journalism. I'm sure a lot of you know about or have probably worked on, in newsrooms where, for example, the Olympics in 2016, I was at NBC. I was based out of Stamford, Connecticut, covering the Rio Olympics, but 2/3 of the staff were there, 1/3 of the staff was in Rio, and so much of the production was getting done, thousands of miles away, and that's only grown over the last several years. Yesterday, Zilla talked about an example with the Tokyo Olympics, where the BBC had built their virtual studio to cover the Olympics this past year, and so, that kind of thing has just kind of grown over time. I think the next step for that is creating metaverse-only events. I'm going to show an example in a second of a virtual fashion show that we did, but I think the opportunity is, right now we're using it to cover hard-to-get-to events, things that are far away. I think there's a real argument to be made there for sustainability and less travel and all of those kinds of things, but I think it also can be a way to encourage people to go to events that only exist in a virtual space, and how do we kind of bring those to people? And one of the biggest innovation places for that is fashion coverage, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And I think that's looking at the fashion space is a great way to sort of think about what can inspire us in the news space, because they're just doing a lot of innovation there. Uh-oh, I think, oh, no, they're still there. Okay, good. The other opportunity is just to keep remembering that nobody knows what journalism, what nonfiction storytelling is going to be in this virtual space yet. It's really going to be up to us to decide what that is and create a framework for products and uses that are going to work for us. Kind of thinking back to the early days of social media, I think we don't want to kind of end up in that space where we're behind as journalists in the way that we were when that first came out. And we have an opportunity to both define what a virtual space for storytelling looks like, as well as how to include more voices in that space, something we're struggling with in traditional media now, so really opening things up. And then the next piece of this, which I always say is like the least sexy part of immersive storytelling or the metaverse, is changing newsroom workflow. If you have graphics editors in your newsrooms, I think it's such an opportunity to teach them how to work in 3D and how to bring really simple graphics into 3D. And I think we'll talk a little bit about the possibilities for breaking news in this space, and I think that's really about those small things, one 3D object to help illustrate a story, and how to bring that in an easier way, less about these big narrative VR and AR projects. And then with any new technology, and I found this since early days of working at Journalism 360, which was a Google and Knight Foundation funded project with the Online News Association, where we built a really big community of immersive storytellers. And the best thing about that was that we all learned from each other and continue to learn from each other. So there's a lot of opportunities out there to connect with other people who are interested in working in this space. And I think that openness, people who in other capacities might be your competitors and competitor newsrooms, in immersive have really become your partners and has a big opportunity to learn from each other there. I just want to show a quick, you can go to the next one, Jodie, maybe. There we go. Wanted to show a couple quick examples. You could actually point your phone at that QR code. You should be able to pull up this piece that we did when I was at Yahoo News in collaboration with the LA Times. And I bring this up for a couple reasons. One, to illustrate that true collaboration between newsrooms. This was a piece that, right following the protest after George Floyd's murder, summer of 2020, there were a huge series of murals that went up across Los Angeles. And this is just one of them. It takes up almost a full city block on the Sunset Strip. And there were 4 or 5 that we captured. We used drones and photogrammetry technology to capture these and then shrunk them down, and they are in web AR. So you don't need to download an additional app to look at it. It will come up and load in your web browser. And there's a lot of things to this that I think kind of speak to the next phase of the metaverse. One of those is that this is preserving art that is kind of ephemeral. It's what are we doing with these pieces that now, 2 years later, some of them have been painted over, some of them have other graffiti over them, others have posters of just, they're not meant to be long-term pieces of art, street art, but they are really meaningful pieces of history, particularly these, and it was a really interesting opportunity to capture them. And I could imagine taking these 3D objects and having them live in a time capsule universe in a decentralized space in the metaverse. There's opportunities for those going forward. So I think it's a really, really fun one. You can check it out later if you couldn't get it up just now. You can go to the next one, Jodie. Great. So this is probably just going to play in the background on mute. Yeah, so this is one of those virtual fashion shows that I was talking about, and this was for Fashion Week in February 2021. We worked with Rebecca Minkoff when I was at Riot and Yahoo, and we captured her entire collection in volumetric capture. So we had a stage in New York. We had like 30-something cameras in this stage capturing every angle of her bags and outfits. And then we were able to put on a virtual fashion show, and that was the year that they were not doing real live fashion shows for New York Fashion Week last year. So we were able to kind of give that experience. And this project then grew into, in the fall, the next Fashion Week, we actually did produce NFTs of some of these versions. So it was a really exciting space. And I really like to look at not just fashion, but art and other places where they're having a lot of investment and conversation and experimentation that we don't really have the resources to do right now in journalism, but eventually the technology is getting much more accessible every single day. So looking to industries where they are able to experiment in new ways. It's been really, really fun to kind of look at that and see what we can take to bring into the newsroom. We can go to the next one. Great. So just wanted to kind of get a little bit tactical and talk about a few things. These are, obviously I don't expect everyone to then go rent out an expensive volumetric stage and start, scanning everything and, making virtual fashion shows in the metaverse in your newsroom right now. But there are really easy things that you can download for free or very cheaply and start kind of playing around with, just ways to create in this space that I think will serve you really well for the future. One is Polycam, and Guido was just showing me yesterday some really cool, I guess like public art that he had captured. We were in South Africa, right?
Yeah, in Cape Town were a couple of, no, not just a couple, I think 20, 30, 40 sculptures of rhinos, painted in different colors from artists, just to raise awareness of that. Rhinos there aren't that many left, and I just used Polycam to capture all of these rhinos, just walked around. It's super easy, and in the end I thought, wow, probably 5 years ago, I would have need like a render artist or whatsoever, and now I'm just doing it with my smartphone. This is terrific.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing what you can capture right now. Especially the new the LiDAR cameras on the new iPhones are just, the technology it's there. It's right here. You can do so much with things that you already have. The other is Spark AR. I know Jodie showed the filters on Instagram, and you can actually make your own, and it's not that hard. There's lots of tutorials online. The Spark AR blog has a lot of really cool inspiration and stories and kind of different types of people and groups who are using it. You can find almost anything on there to create some interesting projects. I think there's always a lot of skepticism and fear about creating something new or investing in something that's only going to live on social media and maybe not point back to your platform, but I think it's a really great way to just experiment and seeing what works and then figuring out how to pull that back in to your content. Sketchfab is a really, really deep library of 3D assets. I've used it for many, many things. It's a great kind of starting off point, has very clear Creative Commons licenses, easy ways to pay a small amount of money for pieces that artists have done on there. Also, I think like NASA and other folks are putting things up there as well, so 3D, totally usable content. And it's a good way to kind of just practice pulling in 3D objects into your reporting on a regular basis. I've used them for a lot of things. It's really fun to play around in there. I will say it with a caveat when there's a lot of artists in there who pull things or they're kind of inspired by video games or other things. So it's great for like real objects. I think when you're looking for a character or something like that, you're probably better off finding an actual 3D artist to make something original for you, because you don't want to end up in copyright land. It's my caveat with Sketchfab. Clone is another one similar to Polycam. You can do some animation in there as well. I'm working with an artist now who has zero background in technology and downloaded Clone and has made his pieces of art, like just pulls them up and has them live in all different places and museums and on street corners and stuff. And it's a very cool, fun app to play with. Blender is a little bit more advanced. It's a free app. It will help you build and animate 3D. But we do have, there's a series of XR tutorials that I helped out with that are on the Journalism 360 site. And if you want to get started with Blender, that's a really good place to go for that. It's like a series of 9, I think, hour-long tutorials that are available for free, all on YouTube. And then I think, just wanted to talk for a second about how do we measure success in immersive. And I think, we're at this really interesting nascent moment in this space, so it's really going to be up to everyone here to define success for their own organizations. When I was at Yahoo, it really was about engagement, time spent, and then what have we learned to take to the next thing. So I really think even if an experiment fails, you've learned something, and what do we take from that to bring into the next project. And then I read everything. I read a lot of art stuff. I'll go to a lot of museum exhibits. I read the New York Times R&D blog. You're not going to be able to do everything that they're doing, but just reading what everyone is doing to keep up with stuff is great. And I have a list of resources at the end of this deck that I'm happy to share. And then I think always partnerships are key, thinking about who to collaborate with, whether that's within your newsroom, the right developer who will get excited about this type of content, or a reporter who's working on a piece that's really visual but doesn't know where to get started with how to translate that into a data visualization or something more immersive, identifying those folks. I really only and this has been true even before I worked on immersive, but I really only want to work with people who are really excited about this technology and who want to kind of figure out what's next. They don't have to know anything about it or be technical people, but I think there's a lot of space for people who are excited about this and really will benefit the newsroom as a whole. And I think thinking about working with other nonprofits as well. We've partnered with a number of organizations to kind of think about how this could grow and who they work with. So just keeping that conversation going. Yeah, and then it's just a list. The next one is just some really great articles out there. I would point out from those tutorials from ONA. There's a podcast series called Voices of VR that a guy named Kent Bai runs, and he has interviewed literally every single person in this industry, I think, who, at least that I know of, with in-depth conversations about their process and their work. So highly recommend it. And then the Reuters Institute report that came out this year is also really fantastic. So great. Thank you.
I think there's one more slide, if
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
mistaken.
We'll leave that one up so that you can find us and
at least
tweet
for a
us.
second, so
Yes.
that you know their Twitter handles from Laura and Jodie. So if you want to have, I'm just throwing it out there. So if you want to have these links, I guess both of them will be happy to send you out the links as well. So, and the hashtag. So that being said, also we are opening it up for questions now. So thank you very much, Jodie. Thank you very much, Laura, for that summary of the masterclass, but also from your session yesterday and your experience from the past projects. If you have any questions, either use that hashtag Perugiaverse or just raise your hand and Stephanie will give you a post-it. We already received one question, so I don't have to start with one of mine, which is always great. Albert asked, in new media, TikTok Reels, there is a trend going on of shorter and quicker content. Do you think the metaverse will change this trend, or will content keep getting shorter and shorter? How will content change with the implementation of the metaverse? I don't know who wants to take that question. I have an opinion, but it's up to you.
I'm happy to take that. I've got an opinion on it. I have an opinion on most things. I actually think, or I'm hoping, that it's quite the converse. I think one of the reasons that we're seeing shorter and shorter content is that we're all in front of screens, right? We've all got these small screens and we're all looking at them. If we've got glasses, particularly if they're mixed reality, we can look up, we can look out. So I'm hoping that actually that means that we'll be able to do more things, because switching between things is going to be so much more seamless. We'll be able to move from, now we do phone to laptop. Well, what if we can do laptop to glasses, glasses to real world? I think that's going to make it a lot easier. And I'm hoping we can do more with things like holograms rather than these very, very short form videos. So I'm hopeful that this gives us a new opportunity to create slightly more longer form and keep people's attention, because it's easier for people to watch. Laura, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I kind of always think that always comes up. I mean, I've heard that question in the past related to YouTube videos, oh, what's the ideal, does it have to be 60 seconds or 2 minutes? And then it really depends on the story that you're telling. We've seen people stick around for an hour watching, really in-depth frontline stuff, and they have actually a pretty young audience on their YouTube channel. And I think, I don't see that big a difference. I think the TikTok thing is, yes, those are short pieces of content, but I think, when people are engaged in a story, they'll stick around. And I've seen that on TikTok too, whether it's the first piece might be short, but then there's like a series that follows it, and people stick around and kind of come in for the next thing. So I don't love to put a time limit on what the content should be or what's gonna work, or try to predict what the next shortest thing is gonna be. I have faith that people will stick around for a good story.
Okay, I'm just quickly checking, but he's still writing, good. You pointed out a couple of tools already that people could use to produce content, and it's getting more and more easy. But where should people really start if they're thinking about the metaverse? I mean, Jodie talked about the different, about AR, VR, MR, metaverse. What platform should I use? So if I'm totally new to anything like this, what should I begin with?
Yeah, well, I think before you try to make anything, you should watch some things. So I think that's really the most important is, some of those things that I put out there, reading about this space, but also trying some AR experiences. There's a lot. Some of them are simple, some of them are big, but you know, the New York Times has probably the deepest, you know, variety of things that they've produced in this space, and you know, really looking out there at what inspires you, and then thinking about where to start as far as building something. You know, I think even just like digging around the Sketchfab library and seeing what people are producing, 3D artists are producing, what people are doing photogrammetry on, is a good way to kind of get a sense of what's out there, and then you can start to think about like, what would I want to build?
Mm-hmm. Jodie, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think it goes back to Laura's earlier point, is whatever you're really interested in and what the story needs. So as I said, you can't do anything unless you've tried it. So go try everything. Go play with it. That's going to spark some ideas. But then as you're thinking about different stories, I think that the two are just going to merge and something's going to spark. And that's where your idea comes from. And obviously, if you want to do a fully rendered 3D VR experience, that's going to be tough to do as your first thing. But there are a multitude of other ways you can actually get involved. So it's really what you're mostly interested in and what the story needs.
Thank you. Yesterday in your panel, Thomas was talking about business and micropayments. And after that, I mean, you were still around. I was challenging him a bit. And we received a question in like more or less the same direction. Before you mentioned NFTs, and since they are going to be an integral part of the metaverse, what's your view on them and what good can they bring? Also considering now it's very hard to read. Maybe I just leave that out.
Can I read it? Can I make it out? Considering that, I don't know, we'll figure it out. I get the gist.
Yeah.
I think, so, the NFT question. So I kind of think there's kind of three sort of buckets that things are falling into now. And I do think that NFTs in the journalism space, you know, I know there's been a lot of talk, you know, AP has done their photo library as NFTs and other things like that, trying to raise money to, you know, support their journalism. And I think that the opportunity is less in funding journalism and more in access to the community that we all have here. I'm interested very much in sort of the relationship between NFTs and DAOs, the decentralized autonomous organizations, whatever they're calling them now. But you know, buying an NFT can give you access to a community. I mean, that's why these kind of Bored Ape Club and other things are getting popular. It's not because necessarily because the art is what people are buying, but because they're buying access to a club. And I think there is an opportunity to expand that club for journalists and bring our readers in who are, you know, kind of special and want to invest into that space. So I think there's an opportunity there that's kind of separate from the, you know, micropayment fundraising piece. I think that is challenging. I heard you guys talking about that yesterday, and I was like, yeah, I'm not sure if that's the thing, but the other sort of piece of NFTs, I think, is, especially in covering NFTs and understanding what they are, I think it's important not to ignore that. It's a big space, and I think that journalism organizations should be experimenting. I would never say, like, don't try it, or don't, because I don't see what the, you know, why you wouldn't, like, sort of research and figure out, is there an opportunity for us as an organization here, I think would be short-sighted not to. But I can't tell you exactly what it is yet. I don't think anyone knows.
I think there is one element.
Also,
yeah, go ahead, Jodie.
NFT, sorry. It's always hard on video. You know, thinking about what NFTs actually are and their utility, we're nowhere near, we're just right at the beginning. We're nowhere near understanding what they are. You know, NFTs are essentially virtual goods. I'm really boiling this down, so Laura might get annoyed with me because she can go much deeper on this than I can. But, you know, NFTs are essentially virtual goods. So virtual worlds haven't really been built out yet. Once we've got these virtual worlds, once we've got our avatars and all of our things in this virtual world that we don't entirely know what's going to look like yet, then we're going to know what the virtual goods can be. But I think until it's built, it's very difficult to do that because we don't know what we're going to see, how we're going to access it. So NFTs is one of those things, the same as the metaverse. It's just at the very early stages. So yes, there's tons of promise, but I don't think anyone really knows what that is and how that's going to work out.
No, and I actually would encourage folks to think about, what are the opportunities for like archiving our content on the blockchain? What is the news organization? What does our content look like 10 years from now? How can we use the blockchain to preserve some of these things that we're creating? I don't know what platform some of these 3D objects are going to live in. We're trying to preserve things. How, that's sort of the benefit of the blockchain in that space, which is not about fundraising, but about archival use. And I think there's a real opportunity there.
I think I'm chiming here quickly. I think there's one thing in there when you look at NFTs, just observing how the NFT space is operating. And you mentioned collaboration, and there is a lot of collaboration, and that is a theme that you actually can look at and take away from NFTs, whether you want to use NFTs or not. But the mechanics, I think that is definitely worth to look at. But coming back to virtual reality, augmented reality, we have a couple of questions about content and how to produce content and how to get started. So how do I convince my editor-in-chief to invest in the right type of storytelling?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were talking about this a little bit at the panel yesterday, and I think the way Zilla put it was really smart, which is it's really always about the reporting. How is this going to serve the story that you're trying to tell? So not letting it be about the technology, but letting it be about the story. And that's really what all of this always comes back to. So I do think that the way to kind of sell these technologies up the chain is, are you going to reach a bigger audience or a different audience, probably different audience right now with some of this, and how does it fit into the larger story? So a lot of the most successful pieces that I've worked on, the immersive piece is just one small part of the larger story. We've done pieces with USA Today where there was, they had a short film documentary and a podcast and a series of articles and an immersive piece. And, that's always, it's giving people more opportunities to dig in and explore and get a more well-rounded view of the stories that you're trying to tell. So I always think that that's the best approach.
And also, show, don't tell. If your editor has not experienced AR, if they haven't experienced VR, they're going to be very difficult to convince. So if you've got a story in mind, show them some similar pieces. If you don't have a story in mind, just get ahead of it. Think about what they like, what they will enjoy. Show them a couple of things. Don't tell them it's because there's things that you want to do. Just say, hey, I've been really inspired by this. This is great. I think you'll appreciate it. Because you really want to get their emotional buy-in as well as the business buy-in. And right now, this is more expensive. Yes, the audience is generally smaller, not always, because you can put it on mobile, but it's really about getting that emotional buy-in from people if you're struggling. So always, wherever you can, show it rather than tell.
I like to think, exactly, I like to think of it as being sort of like the creative director for your story. Like if you were at an ad agency, how would you storyboard this and put everything together? And I think, you have a lot of pieces to it, and exactly, show, don't tell really will get people on board quicker.
Yeah, and maybe what you mentioned yesterday, define your objectives, define success for your organization. So what is your overarching strategy? Do you want to invest into AR, VR? So that probably also comes into play when you decide on something to create a story for the metaverse, in the metaverse. Do you have already some ideas on how we will consume news in the metaverse?
I'm happy to kick that off if you want. We
go
actually
ahead.
did a webinar on it. So a couple of weeks ago, we had a webinar on that exact subject. The short answer is no. The longer answer is that, again, we don't know what the metaverse really actually looks like. We know we're going to be switching between screens. We know we're going to move to glasses. So, I mean, the more exciting things are like when you're having breakfast rather than scrolling through the news on your phone, because not as many of us get physical newspapers anymore. Well, maybe we can have a hologram reading the news. Maybe that's the newscaster. We need to get more imaginative about the way in which we do it. I mean, news alerts is something that's super straightforward. And again, users are going to set them in the same way as, I'm a big fan of the Apple Watch. When I first got it, there were so many alerts coming through. It took me a while to contextualize what I actually wanted and when. But with glasses, we'll be able to have alerts, we'll be able to have things come through. So I think, again, we're going to be looking at that short form, that long form, what the story needs. And we've also got to really consider people's behaviors. I think right now we're seeing behavior because we're coming out of COVID, right? Everyone's been locked down the last 18 months, 2 years have been very different because people have been in one place, they've been using screens more, but people are traveling. You guys are in Italy, which I'm not at all jealous of. And, people are going to work, they're traveling. So actually the consumption patterns are changing. That's now in the metaverse. Because we don't know exactly what it's going to look like, we're going to have to start looking at what the behaviors are, what the consumption patterns are. So again, it's going to be about using it and then sparking ideas. I think the real thing now is that we've just got to start getting ideas. We've got to all be aware of this fundamental shift that's about to happen. We've been caught out before as an industry because we haven't invested. We don't necessarily need to invest massive amounts, but we need to start experimenting so that we're ready. So when we see the opportunities, we can go after them. And that is the really big thing, I think, right now.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think there's things we can kind of say that it's probably not going to be. It's probably not going to be an anchor sitting behind a desk at a traditional newscast, right? And I think we have to think beyond some of the things that we've gotten very used to and tried to push in on Web 2, and that has taken off for some and not for others. And I think, really being aware, it's like if we don't become aware and we don't kind of think about what are those ideas going to be, then we are going to be living in Minority Report where the ads are just following you all the time. So I think it's really important to, figure out what those we have really creative people working in this industry. Somebody's going to come up with some really cool stuff, and some of it's going to work and some of it isn't. But I think there's a great opportunity there, and we'll really miss out if we just sit back and let the, brands decide what it's going to be.
The next one is about inspiration, and probably you answered it to some extent already. Do you know if there are newsrooms at the moment who work on concrete ideas for the metaverse? Or let me phrase that differently. Who would you recommend to look at in order to get inspiration?
In the news space, I always look at the New York Times. I mentioned them before. Their R&D lab is doing really incredible high-level work, some of which makes it into the newsroom and some of which doesn't. Some of it's just experimental. But they've been doing that for a long time now and have a really amazing team over there working on that. I would also say the Washington Post has a great innovation team, and they've done some of the things that I like that are a little bit smaller scale. They have a piece called How to Dress for Space that was done a couple years ago that I love because it's a collaboration between their fashion editor and their science and technology reporters, and it's looking at spacesuits in 3D, and you kind of pull them through the story, and it's really a good one to look at. And then I really turn to the art world for things like this. There's a lot of interesting people working in AR in the art space. So there's a woman named Nancy Baker Cahill who's done a lot of location-based art. It's kind of a little bit like politically minded, but very beautiful. And she's somebody who came from the physical art space and has moved into the immersive space almost exclusively. And I think her work is very cool and tells the story in a really interesting way. So, but yeah, there's a lot out there. I don't even know where to begin. Jodie, what do you?
I've also just pulled up the slide that I showed earlier of 6 of the experts that we had come talk, because I think they're very representative of some people doing some great things. Henry Kaiser, who is one of Laura's old colleagues, is great on AR and VR as well. I would really point to that series, that video series as well, if you want a practical guide. The other person, if you're interested in documentary style, is Noni De La Pena, who's done some great work. She's one of the OGs of VR. That's one side, but I think you're going to start more and more come up.
Yeah. Also, even going back, Nani de la Peña, if you're not familiar with her work, really was they call her the godmother of VR, but she's very early in the VR space and is really the foremost expert on storytelling in this way. Has done projects with Frontline and Inaritu and others in this space, and just looking at those and thinking about what the next thing is there. Her writing and her VR pieces are amazing.
Good. Going into the newsroom, with the rise of metaverse, will there be newsroom meetings held in VR? And if so, in some way, would that influence news production?
I imagine somebody's probably already had a morning meeting in VR. I haven't yet, but I don't know. I imagine somebody's tried that. I mean, I think, even just thinking about like how we've all been working on Zoom for the past couple of years, I've worked with I did a piece with our team in Australia during the pandemic, 2 pieces with our team in Australia during the pandemic, with folks in Europe, just being able to even look at that content, even if you're not having a meeting in VR, being able to share some of those pieces that we were working on in real time, I think certainly has started to change the way we work. So I don't see why you wouldn't have meetings in VR, but I don't know exactly what it would mean for how it would change things any more than we already have. Other than being able to really look at what you're working on in that way, I think could be cool. I don't know. Jodie, what did I miss?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think the metaverse particularly is going to change that in the same way that, I'm zooming in, you're all there in person.
Cool.
It's just going to make it easier because I'm talking to my computer. I can't see you. I can't see anyone in the audience, so I hope there are some people there. But, so I think VR is going to make that a lot easier because you can actually be involved and around people. So I'm hoping that will be better. But I don't think it's going to change anything fundamentally. I think the real thing that's going to change newsroom meetings is personalization and AI. I think that's going to be a fundamental shift because, we're understanding our customers better. We know there are different groups of customers and we have to serve them in different ways. So I think it's more likely if we lose a page 1 meeting or things get changed and it's going to be because of that and the personalization side and the metaverse side.
One thing, Jodie, you mentioned earlier when you talked about the 10 lessons learned from the XR Masterclass, where you also touched base on ethics. Where do we, as journalists, have to draw a line when it comes to reporting in the metaverse?
My God, this is a really big one because we don't know what the metaverse is. The ethics of AR and VR, to be honest, are the same as journalistic ethics in text, in photos. You wouldn't put a photo anywhere that had been edited. If you put an edited photo, you've got to be very clear that the photo's been edited. You wouldn't put a video that's been edited anywhere unless you were very clear that it's been edited. So I think, for reputable outlets, reputable journalists, we know where those lines are. You know where that is instinctively. You just don't make anything up and you make sure that everything's clear. I think the bigger problem for us is misinformation, disinformation, how we label it, how we track it, and how we show that. I mean, that's the one big thing that, sorry, Guido, that Meta, you guys face on Facebook and things. That's not necessarily a metaverse thing, but that's how we deal with misinformation, disinformation. It's just magnified in VR because the impact is so much more.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about avatars and who's behind the avatar, and it is about misinformation and what you can trust. I agree. I think the ethics piece of how we report. We know how to report. We know what's ethical and where those lines are, and I don't think that changes that much. I've been on panels talking about ethics in VR and AR since about 2017, I think was the first conversation I had about it. And at that point, it was about 360 video, and should we rotoscope out the camera because it's there and kind of ugly in the middle of the shot, and that's not very interesting. That's more of an aesthetics question than an ethics question. The ethics questions are, well, are you catching somebody behind you, and are they allowed to be on camera, and are you seeing something that you're not supposed to be catching, and all of that kind of stuff. And those are questions that we know how to answer. But I think when it comes to what is information that you can trust in the metaverse, who is representing each other there, what's real and what's not, that's the question that we don't have the answer to yet.
We just have a couple of minutes left, and one question from the audience. Your biggest wish for news and the metaverse?
That's a good one. I like that. I guess
I've got one more if you want to think about it.
You can go
Mine
first.
is very simple. Let's get ahead of this. Let's not be surprised. We were late to the game on internet. We were late to the game on mobile. We know this is coming. We know that things are changing. We know we're going to move to eyewear of some description. Let's get ahead of it. Let's just stay informed and get ahead of it.
I think my wish for news in the metaverse is the same for my wish for news generally, which is tell good stories and reach more people.
When I get back to your answers, think about your answers. How can people achieve that? What should be the first next step when they get back home into their newsrooms, having like fresh inspiration in their minds from Perugia? What should be the first step?
I'd like to see folks think about the stories that are coming across their desks in the next 3 to 6 months and think about what are the things that they could add to them from some of these conversations. What are some of the technologies that could really help tell these stories in new ways, and how would they go about doing that? Yeah.
Jodie?
Yeah. I echo Laura. I think it's experimenting, it's trying, it's, excuse the pun, immersing yourself. Try AR, try VR. Every time you're thinking about news stories, think what could work, think what you can try, but just start opening your eyes to it as much as possible.
Cool. One question I have to ask, and we touched base a little bit about that when we asked the NFT question, is there a foreseeable business model?
Yeah, of course. I think there's a lot of opportunity for advertisers and sponsors in this space. In the work that I was doing at Yahoo, the platform that we worked on was actually built originally for advertisers. It was, how do you, if you're working with IKEA or Pottery Barn or Walmart, you're used to using AR and putting a couch in your room and seeing how much space it takes up. And so it was really introducing the audience to that kind of content, and then seeing it within news. It was how do we define the content that we're doing that's editorial and not make it look like an ad, right? But I think that as more people are getting used to seeing QR codes, whether that's at the restaurant or wherever, everybody's used to them. Whereas 2 years ago, everybody was sort of a new thing for the QR code. So I think that's a really great way to get folks in, and I think there is an advertising model the same way there's been an advertising model. And then I do think there's, people have had a lot of success on Substack and subscription stuff, and what's the next generation of that for immersive content? I don't know, but I'm sure that the ROI will emerge the way it has for everything else, so yeah.
Yeah, I think the current business models will come through and pull through to VR, so advertising, sponsorship, subscriptions, those are going to be the things that really come through. I think the other opportunity we might have more is maybe on micropayments. Mm-hmm. We might be able to do more, and we don't know yet. But Apple Pay is just so easy now to transfer 1 cent, 2 cents, 5 cents. Venmo, I don't know whether that exists in Europe, but in the US, we use all the time to transfer money between people. So I think we might see more opportunity, but other than that, it's going to be on standard business models. They're just going to carry through in slightly different ways.
We have a question from Albert again, which is probably almost connected to that, because what is the role of the game industry in the future of the metaverse? Probably coming back to collaboration earlier and also what you mentioned about informing yourself in other areas. Probably we can learn a lot from the gaming industry, right?
Oh yeah, they're like the original, it's very funny. When I started working in this space, I was talking to my husband about it, and he's been in the games industry for a really long time, and he just sort of laughed at me, like, we've been doing this forever, like, why is this new to you, kind of thing. And so, that was great. But But I think, yes, we have a lot to learn from the game industry, and I think especially these newer platforms, Roblox and other platforms like that, where they're doing concerts, they're doing all these different events in those spaces, and there is an opportunity to reach more people in that way and collaborate with some of those companies. I think I saw one, I think Lego and Roblox are doing something, I saw some announcement, but they are sort of pushing into that space, and it's not quite journalism yet, but you could see how that might be possible, and then I think looking at how they've built those things will allow us to figure out, what do we do in that space, so for sure. And then, gamers are people too, and read the news, so it's also, they're not totally divorced from each other.
Yeah, I agree. There's so much to learn from them. If you think about gaming, it's character development, it's world building. They've been doing this for years. There is so much that we have to learn from them. And when we talk about learning, we shouldn't just look at news organizations and what news are doing. We should be looking at other industries. Lego's done some great AR, VR stuff. I mean, even the local aquarium here, kids can go and draw a fish, and then they put it into the machine, and then it goes up on the wall. And in this sort of fake aquarium, their fish gets to swim around. Lego have done versions of that. There's so many creative ways of using AR and VR that I just don't think that's why I keep saying we're not there yet. But there's so much to learn from other people, and it's really fun. Like, if you look at gaming, they're so good at what they do. Look at the engagement. The New York Times is hiring people from gaming because they are so great at engagement. We all need to start doing that more and more. So I think there's tons to learn from different industries here, not just gaming.
I think fun is like a really good place to almost wrap things up, because I think that's one thing that I get really frustrated. Like, I don't want to make something that I wouldn't want to load and do and play around with. And it doesn't mean that all the content we do is lighthearted content, but just that it's engaging and fun. And I think we really lose sight of that quickly, but that is what a lot of this, can be.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Jodie. We're almost out of time, 4:30, and I see that we need to end this session. So thank you very much. Thank you, Jodie, for getting up at such an early time. And your full day is still ahead, so I really appreciate that. Thank you, Laura, for the insights. And thank you, everyone, for attending the session, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Sweet.